High protein diets act as a buffer against body fat gain. Hey everybody, I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. Now, I want to be clear because when I bring this topic up, for some reason, some people think that I'm promoting, a keto diet or a low carb diet built around saturated fat in some way, and that's not true. I'm talking about protein. Okay? So we need to be very, very clear because this comes up too. You'll see this written occasionally by a medical professional or whatever, and they'll warn, be careful because a high protein diet, could be really high in saturated fat because some high protein foods have tons of saturated fat. And to me, again, that's kind of a ludicrous argument because they're separate things. And to me, that's strange because I come from a fitness world to even hear that sort of argument, by the way. Because to me, when I think of a high protein diet, I'm like, oftentimes you're replacing fat with protein. Because what do we think of as high protein foods in the fitness world and lifting world? Chicken breast, fish, protein shakes, okay? Egg whites, right? We're not thinking of the really high fat meats because they're lower in protein. They're lower in protein for weight. Yes, obviously calories and percentage of calories, but literally, there's less protein. If you buy a pound of really lean ground beef versus 30% fat, it has less protein in it because the fat is displacing protein. So that's, to me, that's a ludicrous argument. Okay? Because if you're eating really high fat meats, you're eating less protein. So such an absurd argument. But, granted, I see where they're coming from. I do see the point, and I do want to be clear on that point. When I talk about eating more protein, I'm not telling you to add more whole eggs or to, eat really fatty cuts of meat. I'm telling you to add protein. Fat and protein are two different things, right? What are our three macronutrients? Carbohydrates, fat, and protein. They're all separate things. Okay, so I want to be clear there when I make that statement. But we could make the statement that yes, in theory, if protein is high enough, it is still a buffer against body fat gain from those foods. Right? People successfully get pretty lean following those sort of diets. I'm not personally a fan. I don't think we should be eating that way. I think saturated fat, barring whole food dairy products, and that again, I would exclude butter, isn't ideal for health or body composition. But if you eat enough protein and you train, guess what? You still have a buffer against that. So we need to be clear on that. The data on protein overfeeding, when people eat extreme amounts of protein, in every study that's looked at it, even if they try to overeat, they end up losing body fat. Okay? And there's a few things to think about with protein, and it's not that adding really large amounts of protein, because my idea of high protein is going to be really that. But even to a lesser extent, even if you're not eating 300 or 400 grams of protein a day, like protein overfeeding studies, someone who's eating 200 grams of protein a day versus someone who's only eating 100, you're less likely to gain body fat. It is a buffer against it to a significant extent. It's, again, not that you're going to gain a lot more muscle. You're really not. The data doesn't support that, right? Protein exceeding, about 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight doesn't seem to cause more muscle growth in studies, even in competitive bodybuilders and elite weightlifters. It doesn't. Or someone jumps in and says, well, maybe I'm training harder than the test subjects. No, we're talking studies, even looking at competitive weightlifters, professional bodybuilders. There have been studies on, including them, by the way. I bet you're probably not training harder than professional bodybuilders. So you might be training as hard. You're probably not doing more work than them. So that is what the data shows. But what we do see consistently, higher protein is associated with less body fat over and over and over and over. Not just because they're weightlifting when multivariate analysis is done and just the population is looked at. Protein staves off fat gain, and it has to do with a couple of things. Number one, the thermic effect. Okay? Protein has a higher thermic effect. So when we talk about calories in versus calories out, you're going to have more calories out when you eat more protein. Okay? Higher thermic effect in the body. We also have the fact that our humans cannot really store protein as body fat. And even when it's been studied to where they're like, well, if you eat enough, the de novo lipogenesis from the carbs it converts into from the gluconeogenesis could in theory. Yeah, but it's never actually happened. It's been checked in the lab, and while that is hypothetically possible, scientists have not been able to actually get it to happen in a human body. They've tried. It doesn't occur. In fact, every single time you try to force feed more protein, the test subjects start losing fat. Even when you try to bulk them up, they start losing body fat. Again, the thermic effect, the nutrient partitioning, and then the appetite suppression. Protein has a higher satiety. In other words, when you are overeating, when you're eating more protein, it is hard to overeat calories. Again, when I say hard, not impossible. You know, I mean, you can grab a big old cheesecake and get 3,000 calories in a single sitting if you really wanted to. Okay? But if you're eating a lot of high protein foods, you're going to tend to eat less total calories. Your calories in goes down. In fact, that's how I deal with my binge eaters as a coach. I have a lot of them just keep tons of lean protein immediately available in their fridge. So if they have the urge to binge eat or a major appetite issue, I have them force down a bunch of protein to stave it off, because it usually blunts the desire to eat. So that is what we mean by it. It helps you be leaner. It blunts your ability to overeat. It blunts the chemical process to overeat, right? And it has a higher thermic effect. So on average, your calories in versus calories out improves. Then we have the fact that it's beneficial to gaining muscle. And that's the other thing that we find is that if protein gets really high, it's easier to gain muscle without a calorie surplus. That's kind of the other thing too. So ultimately, again, really high protein intake is a good buffer against fat gain. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.